Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today we're going to discuss a country that I love and, a place that I am deeply saddened that it's difficult to go in kind of the last year. But we're going to discuss one pathway that you can go there if it is something that is of interest to you and, kind of explain it in a little bit more detail. I'm going to give you the pros and the cons, a little bit about the cost, etc. And this is Malaysia. Okay, so we're going to talk today about Malaysia and the Labuan Director Visa as a method of getting into the country at this point in time, as composed to maybe a few other options that are out there. So let's dive in. Before we do, smash the subscribe button, nail the notification bell if you haven't already, please. I really appreciate you supporting us. And if you're at all interested, please reach out to me for help with things like international tax planning, international asset protection, designing your offshore structure and implementing it. Happy to help you with that. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer. You can book there's a link in the description below. You can check it out. So anyway, or send us a message through our websites, offshorecitizen.net, offshorecapitalist.com. Okay. Now, so Malaysia is great. I love Malaysia quite a lot. It is, I've mentioned previously, in my opinion, the best value per unit of quality of life in the world, okay? In other words, you can just say, okay, great, where can I get the most for what I spend? In my opinion, Malaysia is it's fantastic in that regard. You can have living which is, closer to Singapore than it is to Bangkok, and you can do it at much lower costs than you can in Bangkok. So wonderful, right? Unfortunately, what's the bad thing? Well, it's been difficult to get in there in the last little while. They used to have a program called MM2H. They put that on hold in 2020. And I mean, they've been saying maybe they'll open it up, they're going to retweak it, etc. But in practice, nothing has really happened. And it shows signs of possibly taking much longer to solve. It wasn't really so great for the MM2H holders. A bunch of them got locked out of the country. There was, kind of all different things that went on there. And so that's not so attractive, but yet Malaysia remains a pretty attractive place in spite of the fact that, there's a bunch of restrictions. And so, maybe, you're not rushing to go there, but, a bunch of people would like to go there. And so what are your options? Now, there's a few different visa options that you could do. I'm going to cover in some future videos some of the other options, so we can discuss that. But today I'm going to cover perhaps, I don't know if it's the easiest one, but most obvious accessible one, which is a Labuan Director Visa. Okay, so you can basically get a business visa to enter the country, to go complete your visa process. Yes, you have to go through, at this point in time, quarantine, etc. We'll see, that's always evolving, so check up on the local rules. But how does this work? So as a director of a Malaysian company, you could basically sponsor yourself, get a visa to come and live in Malaysia. Okay. Now, doing this through a traditional Malaysian company, much more difficult in our experience, not so great. So Labuan Director Visas tend to be the easier way to go. Let's talk about this visa. This visa, you're required to have a Labuan company. You have to be a director on the Labuan company, and you have to pay yourself a salary of 10,000 Malaysian ringgit per month. It works out to approximately $2,500 US per month, and you have to pay taxes on that. Now, because there's a progressive tax rate, it works out to a blended rate of around 13%. Okay, so if you just kind of figure your tax costs on that are, about a few $1,000s a year, basically, is what you're going to pay. And so that's in addition to the costs of everything else, which I'm going to discuss with you in a second, about forming the company and maintaining the visa, getting the visa, etc. But this is possible. I've had some clients and friends who have successfully gone and formed the company, got the visa, flown to Malaysia, gone through the quarantine, traveled. So basically what happens is once you get it, you then have to travel to go and complete the visa process, and then you're good to go. Now, a Labuan Director Visa does not allow you to live anywhere in the country, okay? It does allow you to live in a good portion of the country, though. Most people don't want to live in Labuan. I've been to Labuan, nothing really there, not a place that most people would want to live. But where you may want to live is Kuala Lumpur. Kuala Lumpur is I think it's great. I love it. It's a wonderful city. And it's perfectly fine. Typically, the places that tourists would want to go are most of the popular expat places you can go live in Labuan, Malaysia, or Labuan Director Visa. So that's good for you. Okay, so this is kind of a path to Kuala Lumpur, living great. Now, this visa is a 2-year visa. Okay, it has to be renewed every 2 years, and kind of annoyingly, you have to renew it or start the application process to renew it 6 months prior to getting the new one. Okay, so you kind of have like a year and a half before you start applying and doing it again. So that's, a little bit of pain, but at least it's a 2-year as opposed to a 1-year visa. So that's good, I guess. Not as good as MM2H. MM2H was a 10-year, and I think, a very good deal back in the day. But hey, not too bad. By the way, going back to the kind of that tax discussion, so they don't tax dividends. So basically what usually happens is you end up paying yourself a salary as the director, and then you take the rest as dividends. Now, it used to be that it was really easy to have that company earn 3%, pay 3% tax. So basically your real cost of tax was, the 13 or whatever percent on your small income, and then everything else you paid 3% corporate tax and got tax-free. And I liked this a lot because it was really clear that you could have Malaysian source income. It was no problem. It was all covered under Labuan. It was great. Unfortunately, Labuan regulations, or the government regulations that they're kind of imposing on Labuan companies now, make it much more difficult to take advantage of those tax rates. So if you have a holding company, that's perfectly good. If you're in certain specific sectors, that's fine. But for a lot of other people, they can't take advantage of that at the moment. Again, I think kind of a dumb move on their part. The Malaysian government seems to be doing a bunch of dumb things, actually. But anyway, hopefully they're going to clean that up. Hopefully they'll kind of fix things. But in the meantime, it's not as useful as it used to be. Okay. So what do you have to do instead? You have to do some other international tax planning normally. That being said, that's your price. Okay, it's not the end of the world for most people. Compared to the overall tax burden that they could have elsewhere, it's not bad. And there's certainly ways to structure it so that it's not going to be a big issue for you. Okay, so you can do that. What does this cost? It's fairly expensive by the time you set up a company and you pay for the visas and things like this. You're talking about, I would estimate, somewhere in the 6,500 to 10 grand range, just depending on what all expenses you account for and who you're dealing with and things like this. So 6,500 to 10 grand for a visa that's going to be good for 2 years. Okay, so that gives you some idea. Now you can of course bank there, the Singapore banks, there's a bunch of banks that are accessible in Malaysia, so that's perfectly fine. What else can I tell you about that? The process requires quite a bit of documentation. It's not, I wouldn't say it's like a lot of documentation so much on the immigration side but when you set up a Labuan company, it's pretty hefty on just the paperwork required in that process. It's not a quick, easy thing. So if I was to compare forming a company in Labuan to forming a company in Hong Kong it's like easy, minimal amount of paperwork, a week, you're done. In Labuan, you're like a lot of paperwork and, maybe a month you're done, that kind of thing. And so, much more of a hassle. But that being said, not the end of the world. And so, yeah, that kind of gives you a basic sense. Now, when you do that, you can bring your family, basically you can sponsor them under you as your family, okay? So you can have basically a spouse, children, etc., and they can come. This is not quite as attractive as what you would do under, again, MM2H. MM2H would allow you to like bring your housekeeper and, bring in a vehicle and a bunch of these things. But that being said, MM2H, you weren't supposed to work in the country. And here, you kind of have that freedom to participate accordingly. So anyway, that gives you a basic idea. If you want to be able to move to Kuala Lumpur, to Penang, to Langkawi, to some of these other places, basically go to a broad range of Malaysia, then this might be your best path right now. It is certainly not for everyone, but that being said, for somebody who that's where they want to be, I mean, pretty reasonable option. I'm going to, as I said, do some other videos where I cover some of the other programs that might be better for you, just depending on what it is you're doing. There's pros and cons of each. And yeah, we will see you guys on the next video. If you have any questions about it, please put them in the comments below or reach out to me, book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer. Give it a thumbs up if you like the video, appreciate it. Share it with your friends. Working hard to grow this channel, and I'm going to see you guys on the next video.